Billie Eilish.
All right. What is also funny, so I recognize that name. I could not tell you a single song by her.
I can fix that.
Is she the New Zealand one? Or from
No,
Down Under, everything? No.
no.
Am I thinking Lord?
Yeah, you might be. Yeah, I think that's Lord. Which I mean, sort of similar, I guess, like pocket of genre, but definitely sound very different.
One is a little bit more royal.
Yeah, sure, I guess.
Yeah. What I do think is actually really interesting, which is also kind of, I actually can't see the poster behind you.
Mhm.
Um, who is it or what is it?
The one directly behind?
Yeah, that's kind of him. Oh,
It's
nice.
it's a Nirvana one. That one's that one's special. I got it on like my 15th birthday from a coach, and it's his original from the 90s, which is pretty cool. And so he gifted it to me, which is pretty awesome. So, and I still have it.
Nice. It's not
Yeah.
dusted.
I mean, it's a little bit, and there's like tears here and there, and I feel really bad, but I'm trying to keep it nice.
Some of my posters that I have that I've carried around with many of the apartments I've moved around in and lived in. Initially, I'm like, no, it's getting ripped. And then like fifth apartment, and I'm like, it's like perfectly ripped where like it shows that it
Mm,
has character now. But I'm like, but I
yeah,
don't want it to rip further. I
yeah.
want it to just kind of stay this nice aesthetic ripped.
Yeah, yeah. There's a fine line.
Yeah. The one, sorry, I'm literally just going through all the posters right
No,
now.
yeah,
The one
yeah,
on the
absolutely.
far side that looks like room 93 or something.
That
That
one.
Halsey.
That's a Halsey one, and I actually painted that one. That's on
Okay.
the canvas. Um,
Is that you
yeah.
painted the poster, or that's one that was inspired by room 93 that you kind of created the graphic for there?
Uh, I mean, it's the album cover for her, for that like EP or whatever. But uh, but yeah, I think it's kind of interesting, and it's one of my favorites, and like I felt like it was easy for me to kind of recreate it in a sense. It was also kind of like my first painting that I was like, oh, maybe I'm kind of good at this. But yeah, I mean, kind of just inspired by it, and wanted to have it in my room. So
Well, that's cool. I mean, since I've
yeah,
got to know you, and I'd actually like you to kind of delve into this if you're open to it. Like,
yeah.
we've spoken a little bit, but tell me more as to where you first heard Halsey. What is her kind of influence on you as a listener or as a person, as an artist? Yeah, I'd
Yeah.
love to learn more about that.
Um, so I think my first kind of introduction to her was probably at a way too young of an age. Probably like uh 13, maybe 14. Um, and I don't remember exactly where I heard it. Could have been on like the radio. Um, could also have been from my older sister that had like liked one of her songs. Um, but I really liked it. There was something about it that I really resonated with. Um, and I didn't like immediately get like hooked into it, nor did I explore that a whole lot. Um, but once I got more access to the internet, I guess, had a phone, had music available at my fingertips, kind of like had remembered that there was something about this song and this artist that I really liked, and so I like was doing deep diving and trying to figure out who it was and what song it was, um, and found her, and like it just kind of from there was like, oh, this is this is my artist, the kind of like my soundtrack, um, that kind of happens in my brain. on the daily. Um, so yeah, and then kind of just have followed her throughout, like her journey in music, and throughout her albums and stuff. And that's been really cool, um, to just kind of see her grow up, see her life unfold, to see where I am in life, um, and what I can find within her story and mine that, I can resonate with, or just find really special.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, but and I'm, still following.
Yeah. Well, I mean, a lot of that, is there certain like thematic things that really resonate with you? Like that parallel your ambitions or journey with skiing or stages of your life that only further solidify that connection of, this person being your artist or something, right? Even if it's just a time point of your life. Yeah, I don't know if are there themes? And if so, like what would they be? I don't know.
Yeah. Um, I mean, I think like initially, like at the time when I kind of was discovering her, she only had like her one album out really, and that was Badlands. And the cover of it is her behind like these like red rock like cliff mountains. And she's in like this like pink fur coat, but her hair is blue. And I think that was like quite legitimately like the like, oh, I feel like you are my artist in that kind of sense of, like I've had blue hair since I was like 12. And that's always kind of been a thing for me. And so I think that there was that of like, oh, there's someone else that likes to do that too, or I kind of feel like that resonates in a way. But I think musically, um, at the time, like middle school, going into like high school, and kind of having her music be the soundtrack of a lot of that time. It's very, her music is very, I guess, alternative pop, but it's also very, um, it's just very unfiltered. And I think I really resonated with that, and I really liked that because a lot of her spirit that she carries within the album is like who I wanted to be, and the spirit that I wanted to carry, and felt like that's kind of the spirit that I was inside, but I just kind of hadn't figured out how to like outwardly express that. Um, and it took me a really, really long time for me to figure that out. Um, I don't think I I think I figured that out like recently, within the last couple years. Um, but yeah, I think she's kind of been my inner alter ego, so to speak, or kind of like who I really feel like I am, um, even though I perhaps don't show it. So yeah, I mean, long story short.
Yeah. No, I think you and I, we've kind of coined the and you've taken full ownership of at this point of the violent elegance kind of persona, right?
Yeah.
Like interesting dichotomy, which I'm more than happy to go down. But like talk to me more about like this persona and how it presents. Like everything from, I know we started with Halsey and we can keep talking about that, but like you are very artistic, very creative, and you're a really high performing athlete. Like you and I, we've discussed in different conversations as to like being like a punk out on snow, right? As well
Mm-hmm.
as having like this very precise elegance or eloquence in how you have to maneuver. Same with probably how you approach art. There's like maybe an aggression to an emotive aggression, right, to the creation process, a lot of frustration and a lot of energy, but maybe the actual end presentation is something that actually is more like scenic and calming, right? But there's walk me through that process and maybe elaborate even on if you want to go down that violent elegance wormhole of the sailor, I don't want to say
Hmm.
persona, but what it is
Right.
you embody and how you interact with the world. Yeah.
Right. Um, well, I mean, I think like to start with that, or like what was attractive about this kind of persona or like spirit or like vibe. Um, I mean, I come from parents that snowboard, so like, and really there is already kind of a um rebellious sort of spirit that they carried and also influenced as well. And I think that like just in general having a disability and like having and being born with that and like having to go through life um with that was like, well, I'm already like different, so to speak. So like why not kind of just go crazy with it? Um I think I tried to kind of follow what my peers were doing. And that being part of the process of figuring out who I am. I did not like following my peers. I think I found out pretty quickly like that I didn't enjoy that, and I didn't enjoy my peers. Um, and so yeah, I kind of like I guess just wanted to go on to the completely opposite spectrum, especially of what um, young women and girls are supposed to portray themselves as. I didn't really see many alternative or punk or kind of hard rock or kind of that genre of
Hmm.
style within women. And that's how I felt on the inside of wanting to portray that. Um, and
I have,
so,
I have a follow-up question on that real quick. And I
yeah,
just for interjecting, but so
yeah,
we've had some music. I found this group Thunder Pussy, right? Like an
mm,
all women's kind of like call them a rock band, right? I don't know the exact genre, but I was recently reading some stuff on them, and they're
mm,
often termed like this feminist rock group. And
mm,
I guess in like Washington State kind of post or Seattle Post interview, someone had asked them like, so are you super feminist? And they're like, no, we do all this stuff because we like it, not because we're trying to like counter
right,
like this patriarchy or anything, but like we do it because we're women and because we can.
yeah,
And it comes off as this very like alternative, in your face, feminist type, like
right.
against the mainstream. I'd be curious, is that like kind of what you're getting at, and you're just doing it because you can and you're interested in it? It's just who you are. I don't know if you have thoughts around that, or sorry for detracting from maybe where you were.
No, 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 you're good. Yeah, I think that's like absolutely where I'm getting at. Like, it's not, I'm not trying to put on this persona to like be something that I'm not. It was more just like I don't see anyone else doing this, so like, and I'm gonna do it and not really uh, care what everyone else kind of thought of that. Yeah, I mean, it was easy to be like, I mean, my mom has a cosmetology degree, so it was easy for me to go to her and be like, hey, so I really want to like dye my hair blue. This seems pretty cool, and she was cool with it, and um, that certainly, it, she certainly, and my parents certainly allowed for me to kind of figure out self-expression in that way. Um, but yeah, it was just kind of like, no, I kind of just feel like this is me,
Mhm.
um, and wanting to show that, and I think as well, like growing up with a bunch of boys in my family, and then within the ski world, not there not being many women. Um, I I mean, I was for sure a tomboy as a kid, and coming from an athletic family for everybody, like I was wanting to do what the boys were doing, and I was wanting to like go do rough shit in the yard. And wanting to like do that kind of stuff. And girls weren't doing that. And so I definitely didn't um resonate with a lot of my female peers. I wanted to be doing what the boys were doing. Um, and then within me kind of going into my ski racing career, like there not being that many women within that, both like it's taught me who I am today, like taught me who I am today and the lessons that I've learned. But it also sucked because, being the only female with a bunch of boys, like there was a sense of I had to have really thick skin. And I had to and wanted to show a bit more of this harder persona and style because I felt really like if I showed any sort of femininity in the way that I had thought what being feminine was, that I was vulnerable and I was like, basically Bambi getting fed to the wolves. And so I also think I had created it as a layer of protection and for me to also like when speaking with equality, like for me to say like I'm here too and I want to do the shit that you're doing and I want to do it just as good. And just because I'm a female does not mean that I can't be as good or that I'm less than or um that I can't match up with the boys. And so I definitely think that that's also where a lot of that came from as well, of just like showing showing a little bit of who I felt I was inside, but also who I wanted to present myself as, as feminine, who I thought, what I thought was feminine to me, right or wrong. um, and to be able to like feel like I belonged within the room or the vibe or the energy, or that it was my room or my vibe or my energy, and that I wasn't gonna let other people kind of rule that. Um, so I mean, I guess it's kind of there's definitely bits and pieces that kind of just created this huge built up thing for me, with multiple influences everywhere. So yeah.
Well, I think it's cool. I mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth or anyone else's. Like, I would say you're pretty well established, like within the ski community and with
Mm-hmm.
the team. And I understand like there's always different dynamics of the team as to who's a captain or who's more established or who has what medals of recent and everything. And so I can't really speak to that because I'm not fully embedded in the dynamics of a team like you are. I'm just
Mm-hmm.
support staff. Um, but how is maybe like a lot of this, what you've described, like the self-expression and art, music, personality, like also trying to maybe like pioneer as well as pave a path for maybe other women while being true and authentic to yourself. Where is that currently at as far as like, is there still a chasing for belonging or is it like I'm cool with where I'm at? And what does that look like, that energy now and how you
Mm-hmm.
attack everything you do? Because I mean, we're still only just scratching the surface and I do want to talk about like art and
Right.
skiing more and stuff. So we can definitely move
Right.
move through this, but what's that look like now, knowing that you sounds like you're pretty comfortable and confident with like this elegant violence and
Mm-hmm.
not just belonging, but holding your own space.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Why
Yeah.
to other women coming up
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
men.
Mm. Um, I would say I'm rather very comfortable um within how I express, how I show myself. Um, and there's certainly things that I'm working on, and how I can do better in those areas of who I want to be and how do I get to that. Um, but yeah, I know I would for sure say I'm much more comfortable and confident in how I show up and how I show up with my energy um and within spaces um and like I feel like I kind of within the last again like last couple years have like not say figured out because I don't feel like we ever really figure it out. We always are changing and growing and becoming different human beings as life goes on. But feel like within the last couple years have felt like, oh yeah, okay, like actually I can I can sit down and just kind of be me. Um, and I'll stand up when I need to stand up and say this needs to be addressed or hey my needs aren't being met or I need someone to recognize this but in a sense like I feel like I can truly just kind of be and then if it's like people don't like it okay fine but like I'm still here like you can leave the space because I'm not going to
Mhm.
um and so I for sure am in a place of like confidence and feeling comfortable with uh who I am and I certainly think that the violent elegance has been something I've really portrayed but also have really dug into that as far as like the elegance side and just finding finding the balance of where I can be really hard and punk and violent, so to speak. And then where are the areas that I can show my elegance and my, more feminine side without feeling like it's, too vulnerable or um something that I can't show. And so I think that like playing with that has also been really cool and has been a huge part of finding my own confidence within that. Um, and like learning so much about how I can fully embrace who I am without feeling like I have to change something or, change something for somebody because they're uncomfortable.
Mhm.
Um, I kind of like to say that I was not put on this earth to be convenient. And I think that that's a lot of what in my eyes women struggle with is trying to be convenient for everybody. Um, so really I'm trying to go the opposite direction with that. um, but yeah, I for sure feel like okay, like I've got it. I've got it. I've locked in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, sweet. There's some ideas in the sports performance world. I'm sure it's echoed across industries and whatnot in different or similar ways, but the idea of yin yang and masculine feminine type qualities where thinking of sport and performance like your absolute outputs like strength and power and
Mm-hmm.
benching and stuff is a more masculine representation, right, of physical qualities and characteristics. And the irony is, regardless of your gender or how you identify, is a lot of people in sports think of dominance as being these masculine qualities. And that affords you a lot. I'm not saying it's not important, but it has to be equally balanced and matched with, the feminine qualities. Like, and I'm not throwing things at yoga, but like timing,
Mm-hmm.
rhythm, and like movement quality and flow. And you look at really good movers and really good like performance entertainers, and you clearly see this. Take a Cirque du Soleil performance, for example, or even gymnastics,
Mm-hmm.
artistic gymnastics, right? Where it's very flowy, it's beautiful, it's so aesthetic, and then you're like, holy cow, to do like one of those silk rope type, what's the word I'm looking for? Like
Event.
routines
Yeah.
requires so much foot and hand control and like strength through the scapula, but it looks so smooth, right, and
Hmm.
eloquent. And I think
Hmm.
the same for skiing, right? There's like so much force and like shatter going through, yet you're just doing this really nice, like fastest line trajectory curve down a mountain as fast as you can, sending. It's like
Hmm.
really cool. And there's time points that you'll probably in all aspects of life, maybe lean for a chapter heavier into the yang or the yin or yin or the yang, but ultimately
Hmm.
you're trying to balance it out across your life as whole as possible. Um, there's a good quote, either it's by anonymous or I can't quite remember who. It's like we learn to become who we are, and there's a
Yeah.
million other ways you can say that. We're constantly evolving and constantly adjusting, learning who we are. And I've certainly, in my time knowing you, I've seen you grow immensely, which is awesome.
Hmm.
I'm curious to, we can kind of tether a string here from, some of you exploring yourself, the self-expression, because it presents really well, authentically, I think, in a lot of your endeavors. Um, I definitely want to learn more about the art, but let's touch on some of the skiing, right? Like, walk us through. So, people who are listening, and if you didn't get the gist of it, Saylor is an incredible skier. All right. Stupid strong in the gym. Um, I say that as someone who coaches her.
Yeah.
So I'm biased. But walk us through like what pulled you into not just skiing, but eventually pursuing speed. Like you like to send it down mountains fast.
Yeah.
What pulled you in?
Yeah. I mean, I think, right, like coming from an athletic family and we all do different sports. I didn't come from a ski family, and had my parents um snowboarding, and so I think eh, like intuitively for my parents, it was like not, they didn't second think about kind of putting they've already had a couple of kids at this point, and then they had me, and so like they didn't really give it a second thought of like, oh, maybe we shouldn't put her in sports because she is physically limited and has a disability. Like there wasn't any of that. And I think that certainly created a lot of um freedom and like trial and error to like figure out what I kind of liked and vibed with. Um, I think um activity and doing some sort of sport was important to them. Um, and so like I grew up like trying pretty much everything under the sun, any sport you could think of. Um, and even after like learn like kind of dipping into skiing, I still dabbled in other stuff, but I think the skiing was different because I started at age 4, so super young. Um, and my parents got to kind of um, learn with me in a way. Like as I was doing lessons and figuring that out, they were out snowboarding, and so I, got to see them do that as well. Um, I think what was different about the skiing was that in any other sport that I had participated in, um, I had peers and also parents telling me that I shouldn't I shouldn't be there or that I shouldn't be doing it. Um, and I always felt very I almost want to say like claustrophobic in a social sort of sense when I was kind of dabbling in all of these sports, like just felt very like people are watching me, and then people are also formulating opinions, and some of them are speaking of their opinions to me. um And so I didn't like those sports where there was a ton of like other kids, or it was a more of a team sport, or like their parents are on the bench or the sideline, like talking to my parents about how the fact I should not be doing this. um and so with the skiing, it's just you. It's just you on the mountain. Um and everyone else on the mountain is at a different experience level. A person can be 60 years old and is learning how to ski for the first time. um I think that like that really changed things, and why I really liked it was that I no longer felt claustrophobic. Like I
Mhm.
felt so free, and I felt like, oh, like I can be out here, like quite literally, like I'm allowed to be out here.
Mhm.
Um and people aren't coming up and skiing by me and saying, "You shouldn't be here. You shouldn't be doing this," because they're busy enjoying mountain too. Um and so I certainly felt free in that. And within that feeling, um, had and was, learning how to ski, figured out that like if you just straight line, you go fast. um, and so, um, kind of like was like immediately kind of a speed demon in that way. Just wanted to like get like from point A to point B as quick as possible. Because I just wanted to keep laughing. um and yeah, I just like really fell in love with it, and I fell in love with like the feeling of it. And there was sort of this artistic creativity of making a turn and what that feels like, and like the amount of turns you can make that all feel different, and that I'm making turns with my body in the way that my body does it, and like that's different. um and yeah, I really loved it, and um got really really good at it fairly quick. I was doing like double black diamonds at like 8 years old. And doing like pretty expert stuff, and stuff that I was um probably not kind of not allowed to do. In the sense that within the program that I was learning how to ski from, I wasn't necessarily allowed to be doing that um, that kind of stuff of more expert terrain, and runs, and doing that. But we did it anyway.
So, along that, like, are you going up is between, let's say, 4 and 8? Like, are you going up just on weekends? Are you going up once a week? Are you going up, or sorry, like once every couple weeks? Are you skiing like every day? What's this kind of look like as far as just like time in the environment and you kind of honing in your craft or passion?
Hmm. I mean, yeah, at the start it was like once a week, probably on a weekend. I don't really recall. Um, or just once a week in the middle of the week. And then, me saying, hey, like I want to keep skiing, I want to go skiing, was starting to do it more. And um, for sure, like I remember like being in elementary school, and um, pretty much going skiing like every other day of like the week, um or at least getting like 2 days, maybe 3. And if those days were school days, like I'd call in sick. But I, at the time, like didn't understand that, my mom was calling in saying that I was sick. So then I'd show up the next day and they'd be like, "Oh, are you feeling any better?" And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" I went skiing. Not, realizing that I probably shouldn't have been skipping school, but I just kind of, had kept doing that. Um, and then like by middle school, I was pretty much skiing every every single day minus the weekends. And was just doing schoolwork after skiing. I would go to the more end of all my classes and do all the homework and the tests or whatever at home.
Mhm.
And so I really did rather quickly like make it kind of a full-time thing. Because I, just kept wanting to do it. But yeah.
I mean, lean more into that and walk me through your process because I've been around a lot of elite performers. My brother, one of them, growing up right beside him, and I'm always curious in asking people like, especially those that maybe started a craft very young, 4 years old, like yourself, where by middle school, obviously, if you're starting young, by the time you're in middle school, that's still whatever, 4, 5, 6 years, right, of
Mm-hmm.
experience. Where if you're starting later at 10, 6 years later would be 16. It's just relatively a different age. But
Mm-hmm.
people identifying early on that this is something I want to do and try and make a living out of, or take
Mm-hmm.
to the highest level of competition. Walk me through that process. You started alluding to early on, like getting into skiing, it sounds like afforded you a sense of independence and freedom. Like this
Mm-hmm.
lack of like you didn't feel claustrophobic anymore.
Mm-hmm.
How has that maybe reshaped or like continue to evolve, or did it take on a different form around middle school where you're like, I was pretty much doing this in some way, let's say you're not maybe getting paid, but like kind of thinking I'm gonna do this for my life.
Mm-hmm.
Walk me through that evolution and where if you want to call it, you made up your mind or you kind of
Sure.
had this personal pact or something of like, I am seeking out the best, highest level progression for myself in this craft that is possible.
Mm-hmm.
Love to hear your thoughts around this.
Yeah. Um, well, I think that like within the time frame of, learning how to ski and kind of starting to become good at it, I was watching my older siblings do their sports and do their sports well and having success competitively within that. I also, I had, and also as a family, like we had our own sort of athlete heroes. And so I had kind of clung to that as well of already kind of seeing pro athletes and seeing sports competitively. Um, and that being an option, obviously, like, I grew up on Anthony Robles, who's a one-legged wrestler. And so like it to me was like, well, yeah, like I can be competitive in my sport if I wanted to, or like that is an option.
Mhm,
Um, I think within learning skiing and me getting good, and then my instructor taking me out on much harder terrain, and terrain that like experts and adults were only doing, um, and her instilling that like doesn't matter like who in a sense age doesn't matter and that like you can ski this, um you're physically capable. And so like I was doing a lot of this pretty hard stuff, um and kind of around that kind of end of elementary school, beginning of middle school kind of deal, like was old enough to sort of really understand the idea of competitive sports and had seen the Olympics and the Paralympics on TV. And so I got to watch that as well. And for the Paralympics, to see the skiing and to see that there were people that had disabilities, maybe not my disability or something similar, or a similar way of skiing than I was, like I saw that and immediately was like, oh, like I'm skiing this tough terrain shit and going on stuff that's super hard, and now I can go for this thing competitively. that is also hard, but hard in a different way.
Mhm.
Um, it kind of just seemed like the perfect like next level thing for me. And so I kind of just like looked at, and I loved skiing, like was doing it almost every day. And so it was easy for me to be like, oh, okay, yeah, like skiing can be a career. Cool. Like, let's go. Let's do it. um, and so yeah, like going into middle school, I was literally like, oh, like skiing's skiing's gonna be my career. Like this school stuff sucks. I want to go skiing.
Yeah.
um, so that was kind of what happened within that time frame.
General theme. Thanks for sharing. Like a general theme that I feel like I hear, and it kind of sounds like is there's these like critical threshold points that people reach, whether they know it in the moment or not. It's usually after the fact, looking back, right? Like I think you're looking back and able to describe this more than if if you were in the moment saying like, ah,
Yeah,
I get it now, right?
yeah,
As often is the case. But um, I would be curious, and not to be overly semantic, like just because you said it a couple times of like I was other people were telling me or I realized I was really good. What kind of feedback did that look like for you? Because for other people, whether they're chasing high performance in some level or even just for my own comprehension, I'd love to hear your interpretation of like what good is and how that is some sort of signal, right, to either keep going, whether it means you've reached that critical threshold of, hey, I'm going to make a living off this, or just I should keep going,
mhm,
continue striving for progress. What kind of feedback were you getting, whether that was social cultural, like skiers you were around saying like, holy cow, I can't believe you're doing that. That's so sick. And based on that feedback, who then within the industry, because to paint a bigger picture for the listeners, like you're not just skiing in the Midwest somewhere, right? Where like
right,
it's very challenging to maybe learn on some bunny hills or whatever, but like you're skiing in a dense ski population state of Utah, right, where a
yeah,
lot of great skiers are able-bodied as well as adaptive.
mhm,
We do have, and it may not have been as big at the time, but the NAC, right, which now is one of our leading development pipelines, and
right,
so forth. What does good mean to you? How did that play a role? Who was it maybe you're hearing that feedback from that also then maybe speaking to like role models that, for example, Peekaboo, if you want to go there, like maybe were within the vicinity that then also helped cement some of the ideas that continue to
yeah,
propel you towards progress.
yeah. I mean, I think good to me was also just like in my own observation of other people. Um, like
I'm better than
watching yeah, watching what other people were doing. And then me doing the same thing and just sensing that like there was something um different, I guess, about it. I think that like the feedback for sure was like, well, like technically my instructor was not supposed to be taking me on these like super hard runs. And was not supposed to be taking me um, you know, past like the blues and stuff and like going up to like where all the like super high points are and it's just double blacks. There's no easy way down kind of deal. Um, and so like just within that of of her just kind of being like, Shh, we're gonna go do something cool today. And me being able to like complete it or do it, whether it like looked quote like good or not ski wise, I still did it. And so to me it was like, oh well then everyone else that's doing this is doing this and I'm doing this. So like, and I think those people are pretty good. So I must be pretty good. um and so I kind of think that that's kind of what it was. And then my instructor just pushing me to do that stuff and push the boundaries within that. And like, we ended up like doing like backcountry skiing. I don't know how many adaptive 8-year-olds are doing backcountry skiing kind of stuff. And so yeah, I just kind of in my own observation was like, oh, well, not everyone that is doing this and the people that are good and I'm doing it. So must be good. And then I guess like within me figuring out that like I could make a career and go into ski racing, and be competitive within that. Uh, I kind of doing the hard stuff. I was like, oh well, okay, like I'm already doing the hard stuff. Like I there's not didn't seem like there was a huge gap of like not being able to learn this other hard stuff that's a little bit different, but and so like yeah, I mean, and looked at my parents and said, hey, like I want to I want to ski race. I want to go to the Paralympics. I want to win a medal. Um, and I want to be competitive and I want this to be my sport and I want to be a pro athlete. Um, and that was an easy thing for them, you know, to say, okay, like why not, you know, kind of deal. And so within that, like then going into finding a like competition program for adaptive athletes or somewhere that I could learn because where I was currently learning didn't have one. Um, and that is where I found the NAC in Park City and had I had made their team. But I was four tracking at the time. The
Mhm.
from the start of learning how to ski up until then, and I was probably like 12. Um, was four tracking, and that's all I knew as far as how to ski, how I was skiing. Um, and then quickly realized um, that because we get classified in our sports based on our disability, that it would be unfair for me to ski four tracking than it would to be sit skiing because sit skiing follows my disability. Um, so essentially, like they looked at me and said, well, you can either not compete and not start this journey, or you can learn how to sit ski and do that instead and enter competing in that way. Um, and that was a big decision for 12-year-old me to make.
What was that like? Because I don't know, I'm just trying to imagine this for myself. It's like saying something like, "Hey Brian, you've been learning to play street ball this whole time, and those rules don't apply here. You got to learn how to play ball again." And it's just like, I got to what? How,
Yeah.
how did that go over with you? Like it could be impression or reaction. I don't know. Like obviously you've stuck with it, but
Mm. Um, I think that I just like had so much um, drive for it, and was just really dead set on competing and going to the Paralympics. Like that was just like the ultimate goal, and I was like not gonna let go of that over something that I felt like I could learn and figure out. Um, and so like yeah, it was a big decision, but I also was just kind of like, well, I guess I'll learn how to sit ski. Like,
yeah.
you
I
know,
do have
kind
another follow-up question. I don't mean to deter from talking about the NAC and
of.
future
Mm,
things as where you're headed. But like it's kind of calling out the elephant in the room, but like one I've been in adaptive sport now 2 almost 3 years. Still
mm,
very new to the space, and I'm trying my best to understand it between conversations with people, athletes, people involved in the space, as well as research and psychology and like everything around it. I
mm,
think I'm doing a decent job, but like I'm saying, there's a lot more to learn. And
mm,
this has nothing to do with what you were told or by whom or what organization, but I do think the irony of adaptive sport is inherently having classification. Now, I understand it's an attempt, like I understand what it is trying to do, is
mm,
trying to create with the participants available, determine who is eligible to compete in some level of fairness, right?
mm,
Obviously, we can't have a million subcategories. That said, I am interested, like 12-year-old Sailor, who's learning self-expression, figuring a lot of yourself out, and you found something that affords you the sense of independence, freedom, and something you love. Like it's a passion. And then again, some sort of, we'll call it social structure, right? To play the game is
Mhm.
once again putting, I don't want to say an oppressive classification on you, but it is trying to then fit you again into, hey, to pursue your passion further, you have to fit this box, or you won't be able to pursue your passion to the fullest the way you might like.
Mhm.
I don't know if you've had thoughts around that. I know this is a bit of a comment that I have. I observe it even to this day still at elite power sport,
Yeah.
as many of you and your peers and teammates do too. How do you continue to juggle that though while being like authentic to yourself in the direction you want to go, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, for sure, I think that like that whole classification system is very tricky. And it is a tricky thing for us to experience as para athletes. Because it is like putting you in a box of like, okay, well, you go here and you go here, and it for sure is has an essence of that. Um, I think for me, I mean, I think one, I didn't fully understand the whole concept and or the whole system at that age. And so I think for me, it was a big decision in that, okay, I've been skiing this this way that I had been recreational, like skiing for years since I've, just learned. And now I have to go into a completely different style of skiing and form of skiing. Um, and I for sure think that that was like a little like I definitely like questioned it as like, okay, like yeah, sure, I get it in that in the respect of, fairness of, I if I were to four track, me having a disability that is a like spinal disability, competing against other people that have a missing arm or a leg. So like in that sort of view, like I understood it in that way. I'm like, oh, okay, like makes sense. Um, but I also did kind of go, well, I don't know, I've been skiing like this for years. Like I feel like I can do it, but okay, rules are rules, I guess. Um, I for sure thought it was a little uh it was confusing conceptually, I think.
Yeah.
Um, because I was and felt good in what I was and how I was skiing. And so I think it was a little bit conceptually confusing. I didn't quite fully understand. Um, but like that being said, like there was no other option if I really wanted to go towards getting in competition.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I mean, even though I was like, oh well, I've been skiing like this for years, I think me wanting this thing so badly that it was just like I already know how to ski. So like in a sense, like if I were to learn in a different form, like I still have the background to like maybe speed it up in a sense,
Yeah.
or make it um easier to learn. Um and so yeah, I mean I kind of just was like, well, okay. So I took a year off and learned how to sit ski.
So you took a year off mainly to learn to sit ski, or you took a year off then learn to sit ski?
I took a year off to learn how to sit
To
ski.
learn.
I took
Okay.
about a year and a half, I would say. to learn, and then got back on to the NEC team.
And in that year and a half, would you say you were riding comparable terrain, or is like good enough to make the team, but then your emphasis as well started to gear more towards instead of maybe all mountain, though I know you can shred everything these days. Like it was immediately just to the need of, hey, I need to compete and I need to be able to get down course. Or were you, yeah, exploring all terrain?
There was a bit of all terrain. Um, Certainly not to the amount that I was skiing previously. Um, I think that it kind of was just like, okay, I gotta learn this so that I can get back to this goal that I have and kind of start that. And so yeah, I mean, I rode on some hard terrain, but in a way of learning the skiing. Um, and so definitely wasn't doing the stuff that I was before. Um, but was just like putting, and obviously like learning it. I was very much doing like the bunny hill for a couple months. um, but like was able to pick it up fairly quickly. And was doing a lot of like the steeper stuff um by the end of it, which was had then qualified me to be able to like go down a course.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, but I definitely missed for like the first couple of years of doing just a lot of courses and groomers. I definitely missed the like sort of rough terrain slash ungroomed slash um you know behind the rope, so to speak. um but yeah, I mean, it was the goal was to learn so that I could get into ski racing, and so I think that kind of turned turned more into steep groomers and kind of skiing that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So is it like someone, this is now by like 14, let's say, it sounds like you're sit skiing, trying to get more competitive route. Is it like someone handed you, you'd been playing classical guitar and someone finally handed you, by the time you could like comfortably ski, right, and a sit ski, someone hands you an electric guitar and says, hey, turn the amp on, and you feel more powerful, like this amplifies your passion? Or is it just like it rebirthed in a different way and you've continued to roll with that? I guess what I'm
um
is it did it in going through this process, was it like if I
mhm.
can get through this, my commitment is that much more, and you came out the other side and it's only actually grown.
Yeah, I for sure like after kind of successfully learning
Hmm.
and was able to kind of start training and going into that. I realized that I was way faster in the sit ski than I was for tracking. That immediately, like, it was like, oh, sweet, okay, like this is way better
More
because let me
laps.
go, right, go faster, point it more. um, and so that was attractive. And then yeah, like I got pretty good at it, and like after learning, I was like, oh yeah, like I'll still four track like for fun. Um, Ended up trying it like one time after like I think the first year of me kind of entering training and doing that kind of stuff had gone out, and was like made it like halfway down the run before I was like, I am not doing this. Like it was so interesting because that's what I had been doing for so long.
Mhm.
And I no longer liked it as much or felt like I um could physically do what I was doing in the sit ski that felt more attractive to me to be doing. So, and I kid you not, like I did it the one time and I haven't done it since. I've like strictly just stuck with sit skiing. And I love it. So I mean, it was interesting that I ended up kind of falling more in love with that as I kind of figured it out. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, I do have an idea around pursuing passion, and I've shared this with you on different accounts, but the idea of an infinite game,
Mm,
like a zero-sum game. And the main difference being an infinite game is you play the game to continue playing the game,
mhm,
right? And that there will be wins, there will be losses, but that constantly evolves. And if you lose, you find then a different role to play. You play the next game. It's you keep doing it because you love it. And zero sum is a little bit more of it. There's a finite goal, and the goal is to win.
mhm,
And while I've echoed this a lot with you, I've recently heard a really interesting perspective that I actually probably agree with a little bit more.
mhm,
And I'd love to hear how maybe this perspective, which I'll share, aligns with, you know, maybe where you're currently at with your ski career going into a games year. The idea is to view life kind of as this, or your passion, right? Whatever it is you're pursuing, through this lens of an infinite game, but with both finite and infinite definitive sort of games within,
mhm,
right? So you might have within this, you're playing the game to play a game. There are these little finite moments, right, where you truly are trying to win because there's something tangible there. But even if you lose, well, you adapt and you move on to the next finite goal. And so it's the string of finite goals that have this underlying infinite thread of you're continuing to play the game to play the game. I'd love to hear how you might think about winning, about process around, if you boil it down in psychology, like your outcome goals, right? Your performance and process goals, especially having gone from making this big conversion to sit skiing, 10 plus years later, going into a games year where you're currently at with thinking about that as it supports your day-to-day preparation and enjoyment in being the best skier you can be.
yeah, that's that. I love that. That's a really good question. Um, I think I think now, um, especially like within the off season and kind of like coming to kind of terms and like reality of like that it is a games year. Um, and have been like trying to work up to that for the last 10 years. Um, there is a sense of um I think natural pressure within that. Um, but I think the winning and the losing is a really interesting concept, and I feel like there's bits and pieces that I agree with and bits I disagree with and bits that maybe I disagree with now but I'll agree with later.
Yeah.
um I think it's forever, changing and as we evolve, but I think right now, I think one thing that I learned this off season that I really kind of latched onto was this idea that I can't remember where I saw it exactly or who said it. But like this sort of story and concept of if you knew that you were 25 failures away from achieving your goal, how quickly would you bang out those failures? And I think that totally like shifted my brain and in the way that I thought of failures, and sort of playing the game, and the winning and the losing within the game, um, and just to like change that perspective of okay, well, here's this failure, but maybe I'm one failure closer to achieving my goal, even though I don't know how many failures that's going to be. It's this sort of idea of moving on. I think that it's super easy to get stuck on the stuff that we did wrong or we failed at, or um the stuff that we see as failures, whether they are real failures or not. uh I think that, yeah, there was this sense of like, okay, well, you failed, but like, move on. um and like, continue to play the game. um and so I certainly think that that had shifted things for me within this off season, and sort of entering sort of this year, being a games year of, well, like, this year could quote be, I could fail this year, if that meant, like, not winning, or getting a podium at this race or this race or this race, or I of course have goals for the games to podium. But it's also like, move on. Kind of the continuous, um just keeping it going. I think it creates less pressure, and it creates less dwelling, um, and less like seeing the evidence of, like, I think when we're within that, we see all the evidence of why we suck, or within the failure of, what we did wrong, or like why this happened, because we're in that, we're looking for that evidence that we failed, and we're looking for the multiple things within the failure that made us fail. And I think shifting the mentality of like, to move on and just continue, is now I am searching for the ways that I can quote win, and the evidence of me looking for the ways within what I want to win at, I can do to win. And so I sort of think that that's kind of how I have been approaching things, and will hopefully, I mean, perhaps continue the mindset throughout the year. But that was something that I had kind of thought was really interesting, and I've been kind of running with. But yeah, I think like, what you're looking for is what you get. So if you're looking at your failures, in a sense, like, you're looking for failure. Um, and so it's, yeah, I think it's such a huge mindset shift for sure.
Yeah, a similar echo, but phrased slightly differently, which you've probably heard me say I echo quite a bit in my coaching and in my every year sort of expectations that I share with my teams is what you put in is what you get out.
Yep.
And you could, what you decide to fail with is also what you experience, or however you want to phrase it. But
Mm-hmm.
um, I think that's a really interesting perspective. So thanks for sharing your insight on it. As we kind of wrap up here, just since in about 10 minutes I got to jump on to something else. Um, I do want to ask sort of, and I've started doing this with every guest, what does infinite movement potential mean to you? It's the name of the podcast. Um, it is something that I have a lot of ideas around that continue to evolve, but it is entirely open to interpretation. But if you heard infinite movement potential, maybe where you're currently at, in your stage of life, current goals, situations, etc., and also maybe knowing me and how I coach, obviously, like, hopefully some of I might have influenced some of your perceptions of what movement potential means, but maybe not. And hopefully you've taken some time to kind of experience movement in different ways, as well as movement across different environments, and that's giving you more independence and pursuit in freedom. So, what does it mean to you?
Um, hmm. I think I think infinite movement potential is like I think the instinct is to think about it in a physical sense, which, you know, isn't inaccurate or, like I just think that that's kind of where my brain goes to, and also within like the where we are in, you're coaching and I'm an athlete, like we're working on a lot of physical movement. So like that being a big part of my life, like I can go into that of what that means physically. And I think physically that to me just sounds like if it's infinite movement potential, then it's unlocking movement that we might not even know we have access to. And unlocking that and discovering that, and for that movement to be beneficial, um, and to explore that physically, um, and to kind of see what the body does. Um, I think that the body is a mind of its own in a sense, and so I do think that there is a sense of I think a lot of people stay within, like, well, yeah, my body does this and my body does that, um, but haven't explored what else your body could do that you probably haven't even conceptually like thought about or comprehended. Um, and so I think that that's kind of what it is, physically in a sense. Um, I also see it in a way of sort of outside the body of sort of energy, and the way the world moves, and kind of call it like universal shit or whatever, but like kind of, yeah, like the energy we have outside of us that we carry, and the energy within the environments we live in, and breathe in and kind of move in. I think that like that movement potential is sort of similar within the physical of like it has a mind of its own. Um, we're constantly surrounded by energy waves. You can't see it, but they're there. And they change and they shift constantly. And so I think that, that is movement within within the air, within sort of the energy that we all carry, and the way that we kind of quote like vibrate,
Mhm.
and the way that the world vibrates. Um, and we have the ideas of what that is scientifically, so to speak. Uh, but I think that there's like infinite movement potential within sort of that outside area of energy, and sort of the waves of the world that we carry, even though we can't see it. But I
Mhm.
think if we pay attention to it, it's really cool, for me at least, to kind of pay attention to that and have more awareness within that kind of style of looking at things. But it's, yeah, I see so much like movement potential. We're always moving, we're always evolving. Um, and so that's where I see a lot of that as well, that I don't think a whole lot of people do. Um, so yeah, I think for sure there's physical infinite movement potential, but I also think that there's infinite movement potential within kind of the energy of the world that we live in. So
I love it. I think that's an awesome perspective, one that I don't think I'll hear again from other people, that they've conceptualized this way. Kind of the way I am hearing some of what you're saying, that I just for other people it might be tangible is that you can't separate the fact that we are agents in our own infinite movement potential, but that there are things beyond us, like within the environment, whether that's wavelengths or information that also directly influence what unlocks our potential at any given movement, for or moment. For example, how you move on snow and as at ski is very different than if you're crutching or walking on dry land. And the way you'll express movement is bidirectionally influenced by you, the agent, and the environment, as well as the task.
Mm.
So love it. If people want to get a hold of you or follow along on your journey, Sailor, we didn't even touch on some of your art and a
That's
lot of
for part two. That's for another episode.
and we will for sure have you back on. But if people want to at least start discovering more about you or yeah, follow along, where can they get a hold of you?
I mean, right now I'm only on Instagram because I don't like social media. Um, only on Instagram. Have my sort of personal slash athlete slash artist account, which is Sailor J. Um, I'm working on kind of figuring out how I want to sort of maybe separate them and have more of an artist account and or create some sort of website or just find an area to kind of put some other stuff as well and what I'm doing outside of athletics. So um, I'm working on that, but for now it's just the one Instagram.
Hell yeah. Well, thank you for your time this afternoon. We enjoyed this fruitful conversation. And yeah, go give Sailor a follow on the gram.